Welcome back to another episode of the Startup Junkies Podcast. Before we begin, if you could like, subscribe, and share, however and wherever you are consuming this podcast, that would help us out a lot. So my name is Matthew Ward, and I'm on the Startup Junkie team. Today I have with me my usual co-hosts, Jeff Amerine and Caleb Talley. How are y'all doing today?
Doing
Very
great.
usual.
Good.
It's March and St. Patty's Day is coming along with March Madness. So how bad can it be, right?
And today we have with us our special guest, Bryan Clayton, who is the CEO and co-founder of GreenPal. GreenPal is an online marketplace that connects homeowners with local lawn care professionals. It's been dubbed the Uber for lawn care and has over 200,000 active users. Before starting GreenPal, Bryan founded Peachtree Inc., which was one of the largest landscaping companies in Tennessee. So we are very fortunate to have him on today. Bryan, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
And to kick it off, I'd be curious to hear more about your background and what led you into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I was actually drug into entrepreneurship, kicking and screaming by my father on a hot summer day. He said, "Get off your butt. You've got a job to do. You're going to go mow the neighbor's lawn." And he made me go cut the neighbor's grass. And luckily he did, because something about that just stuck with me. I made $20 and I just thought, wow, this is awesome. I can like work as much as I want and make money. This is great. And so I remember the first thing I did after I got done mowing the neighbor's yard is I went back to my computer, little old school desktop computers in the late 90s, and printed up some flyers off of Microsoft Word. And by the end of that first summer, I had like 12 customers in the neighborhood I was mowing yards for. Stuck with that little lawn mowing business all through high school and college, and grew it little by little. And when I graduated college, I had to make a decision. Was I going to go into the job market, or was I going to double down on this lawn mowing business? I didn't really want to be a lawn guy. It's not what I went to business school for, but I said, well, let's see what happens, and let's just give it another few years. And I made a business plan, and over a 15-year period of time, I built that into one of the largest landscaping companies in the state of Tennessee where I live. Got it over 150 people, over $10 million a year in annual revenue. And in 2013, it was acquired by one of the largest landscaping companies in the United States. So going from just me and a push mower to me and 150 people, like 90 trucks going out every day, I learned a lot about how to build a business, and just through trial and error. And I took all of that knowledge and pumped it into my second business, GreenPal, which is now the Uber for lawn mowing.
That's a great story. I mean, it's amazing how, in some ways, the accidental business, the one you never probably were at sleep at night dreaming about, becomes something that can be huge and really great, nice exit and all that. But from that very people-intensive business, what did you learn about managing people, setting a culture, and all that kind of thing that's so crucial to making a successful business go?
Yeah, especially in that kind of business. It's very, like you said, it's people intensive, it's asset intensive, it's hand-to-hand combat, it's in the trenches, and you're only as good as your people. And I had to learn the hard way how to become a leader. I was a terrible leader for many years, and it kind of, after I got about 15 or 20 employees, I began to learn that, wow, this thing is bigger than me. It's more important than just me. I need to like treat this thing as something that is important for not only myself, but everybody that depends on it. And I began to learn about what it meant to be a leader. And I started studying guys like John Maxwell, and just started absorbing everything that they put out. And over time, I was able to really focus on developing the culture of that business, and why we all went to work there, and why it mattered. And that was a lot of fun. It got us through the 2008 crisis that we were able to shepherd the business through. And sadly, when I sold that business, I literally cried, because that company was my family. I had 150 people there. I knew everybody's name, and it was just a lot of fun working there. And so, like, when you're in a service-based business like that, it's very people dependent. That your culture is kind of one of your competitive advantages. And one of the things I learned the hard way was, if you don't like the culture of the business that you're working in or working on, it's, as the leader, as the entrepreneur, as the owner, it's your fault, because you get exactly the culture that you deserve. Your culture and your business is going to reflect who you are. It's going to be the tone that you set. So I had to learn that the hard way about halfway through, and just look myself in the mirror and said, okay, it starts with me. I'm going to change it. I'm going to turn the culture around in this business. And luckily I did, because that was one of the things that made it strong.
What would you say are probably some of the, I guess, early lessons from being there in the trenches that you could translate to, GreenPal? You've got kind of being the Uber of lawn care. It's kind of a tech transition to a tech industry. How do you translate some of those lessons from working hands-on in lawn care to what you're doing now?
Yeah, to your point, making the transition from a blue collar style of business to one that's completely tech oriented was a big transition. It was about a 3-year kind of learning curve, I guess you could say. But there are some fundamentals that I learned, running the first business that apply to the second business. One is a relentless focus on the customer, a relentless focus on the feedback from your customers, and trying to make it super easy for them to talk to you and communicate with you. That was one thing that I kind of leaned on in the first business, and one thing that we applied to the second company in GreenPal, and we still to this day, 8 years later, is making it super dead easy for anybody that does business with you to talk to you and tell you how you're doing, where you suck, where they wish you would improve. And that was one thing that carried through. The other thing was just the domain and industry knowledge. I was kind of, when I started GreenPal, I was kind of solving my own problem. I saw how difficult it was to start a lawn mowing business and to get your first 100 customers. And I saw how difficult it was for homeowners to hire these small service providers. And so that domain industry experience kind of helped me start on second base. And so I think if you're starting a new business or like inventing a new service from scratch, that can help. It helps to have some industry knowledge and bring that to the plate when you're starting a new tech business like I was.
These marketplace businesses where you've got a two-sided market, they can be tricky, where you can get all the providers lined up, and if you don't have the homeowners, all of a sudden the providers leave, or you get the homeowners, you do a lot of customer marketing and get them going, and you don't have the providers. How were you able to maintain that kind of that sync, if you will, between the two sides of the market to be successful? I think I read somewhere that you have 200,000 active customers at this point that are engaged on it, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. There's over 200,000 homeowners that use the app to get their grass cut, over 10,000 lawn care services that use the app to run their business. But it didn't start that way. We're an 8-year overnight success. The first 3 or 4 years were really, really, really tough. And one reason is, to your point, starting a multi-sided marketplace is really hard. You have a cold start problem. You have a true chicken and egg problem. And the way we got over that was just sheer focus. We just stayed in one area until we could figure out how to do it. And we stayed in Nashville, Tennessee, and not only Nashville, Tennessee, but like a certain part of Nashville, until we could figure out a way to attract suppliers and homeowners and spark that kind of critical mass of interactions that happens between the two of them. Because if you can't do that, then nothing else matters. And the way we dealt with it in early years was not only focused, but true hand-to-hand combat, in terms of I had a personal relationship with the first 500 service providers that came onto the platform. And I would pitch them on the idea of like, hey, we have this app. It really sucks right now. It doesn't have all these features, but we're working on them and we're building them. But I'd like for you to try it out and give me feedback as you're using it. And along the way, I'll give you free coaching on how to build your lawn mowing business. Because I know this business. I've spent my entire life in it. And they're like, yeah, sure. And so that kind of hand-to-hand combat, like hand cranking, kind of got us over the cold start on the supplier side, until we could figure out, okay, this is how we can reach out to these folks at scale and get them onboarded. And then for like a short period of time, we can then reach out to homeowners and get them onto the platform and spark those connections between the two. But to your point, it's really hard. And that's why most marketplace businesses fail, because it has to be done over and over and over again in every town, city in the United States. You can't just go nationwide at the flip of a switch. You have to build every city from the ground up.
Is it transaction pricing, where you're getting a percentage of the pricing? Is that how it works?
Yeah, we make money a couple different ways. One is we take a piece of the transaction for all of the work that we drive to service providers, and that's variable depending on how much business they're doing through the platform. And then the second way is your higher end or your service providers that use the platform to run their entire business. We have some premium tools that they can pay to use. And so as time has gone on, we've identified ways that add value and to be able to get a certain a small slice of that value.
How many communities are you in so far?
Right now we're in every major city in the United States and all of the major suburbs around that city. So one thing we learned, so that's something like it's over 300, somewhere around between 300 and 400. One thing we learned in the early days is when you're launching a city, a market, you're not launching Atlanta, Georgia. You're launching Smyrna, Covington, Alpharetta, Marietta, East Point, and like these are all of the suburbs around Atlanta. Like just because you're in Atlanta doesn't mean you can service Atlanta. It means that you have to literally build a little market in all of the towns and cities around that metro. And so that was one of the things we learned early on, and counterintuitively, it's actually easier for us to add value and drive revenue by going to an Omaha, Nebraska than it is a Los Angeles. We're actually able to extract more value out of a Knoxville, Tennessee than we are a Miami because we're able to go into the market and add more value and get the flywheel going easier than we are in these huge towns. And it's funny, it's actually what DoorDash did against Uber Eats and Postmates. They went to the smaller cities first and then built up from there. And it's kind of the strategy we're following.
You're in good company. That's what Sam Walton did when he launched Walmart. He went to all the places nobody else was, places with less than 50,000 people. So it's the hit them where they ain't strategy makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think there's correlation between the least you can make your business, the least sexy you can make your business, the greater your chances of success. And so, and that's part of that strategy is like, nobody really thinks to go to a Wichita, Kansas. They think to launch Chicago. Well, yeah, we're in Chicago, but we didn't go there until we figured out a way to make it work in the smaller towns first.
Ryan, you mentioned scale, and the first thing that pops up in my mind is venture capital. So on that, what are your plans for expansion, and is venture capital a part of that?
Most of the time when you have a consumer-facing technology product like ours, it is backed by venture capital. It kind of almost has to be because it just takes so much resources and effort to pull one of these things off. Our business is bootstrapped. We're self-funded, and the reason why we took that approach was, one, we're in Nashville, Tennessee, so there's not like a huge river of venture capital floating around here. So there was that, but also we just never really had the appetite to go out and spend 6 months, a year raising. We just really wanted to get to work on building a product. And so kind of that bias towards building a product and getting things done kind of steered us away from venture capital. And once we started making money, we were able to reinvest those revenues into growing the business. And kind of one of my philosophies in business is revenue is the best form of financing. I think it can increase your chances of success. Now, I'm not hating on capital. If you look at your phone on the home screen, probably every app on that home screen was backed by venture capital. But however, it's usually a bad bet for most entrepreneurs. The reality is 9 out of 10 of these things fail, and you can waste 5 years of your life, focusing your whole life's intensity into it and end up with nothing. I never really wanted to make that bet. I wanted to take the slow and low approach. My co-founders did too, and just focus on building a sustainable business that was profitable and reinvesting that capital. And, after about 2 or 3 years, we were raising the equivalent of a seed round every month in terms of revenue. And so that made it easy to grow the business off of its own revenues. And, now we have, if we have to say no to venture capitalists every week. We have tons of interest, but we're just continuing to grow this thing off of its own revenues. And that's one reason why we were able to kind of get through COVID and never lose a night's sleep, because we were in charge of our own destiny the entire time. So luckily we took that approach because it's worked for us.
Yeah, Bryan, we're in that venture game, but I have to tell you, I try to talk people out of it more often than not, just because the happiest people I know are the people that built a great company, bootstrapped it, used customer revenues to drive it, didn't feel like they were going to miss a market opportunity if they built it at a pace that made sense for them. And they don't answer to anybody else, because once you get on that venture capital treadmill, you're on their treadmill, whether you like it or not. And they're going to have a lot to say about when you exit the company, whether it makes sense to you or not. So I love that kind of story. I mean, if you can build a company with your own resources or with some co-founders, you're going to be happy that you did ultimately. That's a great story.
I agree. If I'm investing my money, I'm going after the moonshot.
Sure.
I'm like, if I'm going to put 50 grand in something, and I do a little bit of investing, I want the guy with the $1 billion idea and the $1 billion for it. Let's go for it.
Sure.
If I'm advising my brother-in-law, I'm telling him, hey, build a sustainable, profitable business and do it for a decade or two, and you'll have a much greater likelihood of success. And so it's funny, like, I kind of, just depending on like what hat I'm wearing, I kind of view it differently. And in our particular like use case, the Uber for X, there's like a graveyard of Uber for X ideas. Uber for home cleaning, Uber for massages, Uber for laundry service, Uber for parking your car, valet parking your car. And there's probably like, I don't know, $50 billion of capital crash into the ground chasing these ideas. And I think a lot of them could have been good businesses had they bootstrapped, but it was kind of like the steroids of venture capital being pressed onto them. They kind of grew too fast, and it was kind of like in most cases attaching like rocket boosters onto the side of a wooden barn. It just wasn't ready to fly yet. And so that's kind of like, that's one particular like context for us. It's like, when you're crafting these real world experiences and developing an app to make them run smoother, a lot of times it's better to go slower. Sometimes you got to go fast. Like in the DoorDash case, capital was the thing that enabled them to win. And then sometimes that's not the case. And so for us, luckily we were on the right side of that bet.
I have a question about the functionality of the app itself. So, and looking at it, you've got kind of like the feature for lawn mowing and then snow removal, which we could have used, a month ago here in Northwest Arkansas with the snow apocalypse we had.
Yeah.
But as somebody like me, so I'm renting right now. My yard mowing services are done through the property owner, the property manager that I have. But I would have need for I like mulch in my flower bed or that sort of thing, leaf removal. What's the functionality in regards to some of these other one-off projects?
Good question. So for us, why we are where we are is for one reason: focus. We have focused on being the best in the world at one thing. Push a button, get a great guy or gal to come cut your grass for a great price, and have confidence that they're going to show up, and they do show up. That's all we focus on, and we've built an app that makes that run super smooth and easy. You come to the homepage in 3 seconds, even if you're drunk, you understand what it does. And that's how we've gotten to where we are. Now, after you get hooked up with a great lawn mowing service, you can layer on these other services like mulch, weed removal, trimming, seed, tree removal, gutter cleaning, all these other things. And there's a UI to make those things easier. But we don't put all of that on the front door, because if we do, it's kind of analysis by paralysis. Okay, this thing does everything. How's it any different than like Home Advisor or Angie's List? And then we can't build liquidity in all of those things either. It's like there is no push a button, get this like tree limb hanging over my roof trimmed. Like that just it's not practical. But we can enable that Uber like experience for something as simple as a lawn mowing. And then once they get locked in and you got them set up for the season, everything's going smooth, you can then layer on these additional services. Now there's one caveat to that. We did offer a Uber-like experience for snow plowing for a couple of reasons. One, we saw the lane to be able to do that. And two, we're a seasonal business, and so for about 4 months out of the year, our traffic goes down by 80%. Our revenues, transactions, everything goes down by 70 or 80%. So we built that complementary service onto our technology stack so we could be able to stay relevant during those 4 months in terms of like the media, in terms of reaching out and with our PR strategy, and then also generate some transactions and some revenue during those months as well. But that goes away, April 1st. And then we clear the path for, okay, yes, Homer Simpson can understand what this thing does when he comes to the landing page, and it's dead simple. And that's kind of been our strategy that's gotten us where we are today.
Cool.
Bryan, how big of a worry is retention from the user side? Because from my perspective, if I find a lawnmower guy and he's really good, let's say I find him on the app, we get a connection. It's like, well, I don't need the app anymore. I have my guy. Has there been any thoughts around that?
Yeah, that's something as when you're starting a marketplace like this, you always need to be mindful of and paying attention to, and not looking at it from like a thing that you have to combat. You have to look at it as a thing that you can leverage. And so for us, the fancy term is platform disintermediation. And so when disintermediation occurs, it's not like happening to us, it's happening for us. And so that's the way we've always approached it and looked at it. And in the early days, it didn't really happen because we had a personal relationship with every service provider. But then as we grew from like 500 to 2,000 service providers, it started to occur. And we started to really unpack, okay, well, why would this person like do it the old way? And then we started understanding, oh, it's because they only have 2 customers on GreenPal. Like, why do they even give a crap about GreenPal? Like they're in Knoxville, they only have 2 customers. So it's like, we don't have necessarily a feature problem. We have a liquidity problem. And we started to understand once we get that service provider over 20 recurring customers, there's lock-in and there's just no reason to go back to do it the old way. It would be kind of as silly as like getting in the Uber and riding to the airport and the fare is $15 and you're like, hey, for $13.25 we can cut out Uber and I can like pay you cash and you can give me change. Like that's an extreme case, but that's kind of how it is with GreenPal. Like once you're a homeowner and you understand that you can hire somebody for $27 to come cut your grass and you don't have to like leave a check under the mat or cash app them or some crap, you don't want to like save $2 on that transaction. And so that like we've approached it as like an R&D type of thing in terms of like, okay, this is how we need to add more value to this equation. And then also like looked at it as on both sides of the transaction is like, okay, how can we make it just like a no brainer to where nobody would want to do it the old way anymore? And a lot of that is a function of what your take rate is too. Like a lot of, like a big crash and burn story was HomeJoy. They were Uber for home cleaning and they blew up like 60 grand in venture capital in 18 months. And one of the things was the retention and the disintermediation. And I think one of the functions of that is they were taking like 30% of the transaction. So there was an incentive for people to go offline.
It's kind of like a psychology thing almost. Like that's how you do it now. Just like Uber's a verb as much as it is a noun. That's just in our brains. That's replaced taxi or taxiing as far as how you get a ride. So it's just kind of reshaping the psychology of how folks do something in particular.
Yeah, and COVID has accelerated that. And so DoorDash, Uber Eats, Postmates, Instacart, all of these multi-sided marketplaces enable these chores to get done on a local level have had banner years because people are now looking to digital interfaces to get things done as a default way, not as like I'm an early adopter and I'm just going to check this out. It's like, no, this is the default way you do stuff now. And that's helped us too. So I think COVID has accelerated that in terms of conditioning the masses to use things like DoorDash and Uber Eats, whereas, 2 years ago they wouldn't have had to.
Bryan, we've seen some stuff roll out in terms of autonomous mowing, both for commercial and home use. How do you feel about that? Is that a competitive threat or is that something you embrace and you try to figure out how to work into your master plan?
That's not our biggest threat. I think we're 20 years off. I think we'll have Rosie from the Jetsons cleaning the inside of our house before we have unattended spinning blades just going all over the suburbs. And I've looked at these things and like I don't want to be dismissive of them because I think 5 or 10 years could look very different. But as of right now, the technology today is it's more of like a hobbyist thing. You have to lay like a wire around your yard and like a professional contractor has to install that. And then you got to buy this thing. It's like $2 or $3 grand. And then that thing has to be serviced. So you got to pay somebody $50 a month or $100 a quarter to service it. And then somebody still has to weed eat and trim and blow. And it's like, our average homeowner spends $70 a month. And so it's like, you look at the ROI and I'm sure costs are going to come down and maybe there might be some new technology where they can They can use some sort of like artificial vision to understand where they are. But as of right now, you still have to install this wire around your house. So I think here's the bet. I think you will see cars with no steering wheel before you see ubiquitous robotic lawn mowing at a price that's competitive. And so when that happens, hopefully we'll have a couple years to understand, okay, this is inevitable, and we can mold our platform to be kind of like Uber would be for self-driving, mold our platform to be the Uber for robotic lawn mowing. And so we would be a part of that when that happens, but I still think it's a decade or two off. And I think we have cars with no steering wheels before we have just ubiquitous robotic lawn mowing.
It's a good insight from a market standpoint. Do you plan to move into adjacencies like commercial or small commercial with what you're doing, or do you stay strictly residential?
I think we stay doing what we're doing until we are the Instacart or the Uber or the Postmates or the DoorDash for it. We're still, like somebody mentioned, that it's a verb now, like Uber to the airport. Until we're in like the lexicon, and to where we have like 50% or 60% of market share of people getting their grass cut. I think we just stick with this one thing, because you don't, like, I've spent 15 years in the lawn mowing business, and so like I understand like the commercial side and the residential side are really just two different industries. And so for us to add value to that industry would be like a bet the company decision. And we have so much further to go on just this one use case in terms of the amount of grass that's getting cut. We're 1% of that. We have a long way to go, and there's a lot of white space. So we're just going to stick with what we're doing.
I'm curious. You mentioned earlier about kind of PR and the strategy there, and how y'all used to kind of the snowplow effort there to stay relevant during the off season. So we at Startup Junkie, I've got an event coming up. That's what I do for Startup Junkies, kind of coordinate some of these events and programs and webinars. So of course now, and one we have coming up is with a panel of business journalists. And I've noticed in researching GreenPal that y'all have got a lot of good press. And I'm curious how you've approached that as a CEO, co-founder, in pursuing that good press from some of those, big names in the business media, because that does go a long way, obviously. And PR strategy is, good press, earned media. How have you approached that?
PR is tough. And I think it's why most people shy away from it. One of my favorite quotes, I read this early in starting GreenPal, is Bill Gates. He said, if I was down to my last $10, I would blow it all on PR. And that stuck with me. And I thought, maybe he's onto something. Maybe we should focus on PR. And so early on, like, I have two co-founders, and we've all worked our butts off getting this thing going. But one co-founder, all he has ever done for 7 years is PR. I mean, that's it. I mean, for every day for a while there, he was emailing like 100 or 200 journalists a day on pitches and angles and ways to craft a story for them to talk about us and the value that we're bringing to homeowners and small business owners. And so for us, PR is a big strategy, as a big part of our strategy to move people to the platform on a local level. And we would rather be in the St. Louis River Times than the USA Today. We would rather be in the Sacramento Bee than on Good Morning America. Because for us, it's a local PR strategy. We want to move a local audience to a local network, and we want to also get the signals for SEO for that. And so it's been a big part of our strategy. It's one that we've kind of bet the company on early on, and still to this day, it's how we are able to grow the platform. And one more thing, if you're bootstrapped, it's something you can just do, and it just costs you whatever you had for lunch that day. A peanut butter sandwich. You can get a PR hit for every peanut butter sandwich you eat.
Question about the how the liability conveys from the service providers to you and kind of the indemnity there. One of the issues that would strike me in a residential lawn care business was, if you had that kind of business, you'd have to be worried about I-9 status and the right to work and all that kind of stuff that the federal government is normally pretty concerned with. How do you manage that in terms of your onboarding of new service providers? Is that just covered by your indemnification, or is that something you have to be concerned with?
Yeah, you can see the scars on my hands. 15 years, 100+ laborers, employees, and I-9 audits, and workers' comp. And I mean, if I was in a lawsuit, I was in a lawsuit or two in that business for as long as I owned it, and it was either job accidents, or my crew tore something up, or you name it. And so I didn't want to do that again. I didn't want to relive that. So when we built GreenPal, we architected it in such a way that we are a marketplace that introduces homeowners to service providers and enables them to do business in a much easier, more efficient fashion. We are not your lawn mowing service. We are not the employer of these lawn mowing services. As a matter of fact, they're not even our contractors. They pay a commission to use the platform almost as a marketing expense. And so that was one thing that we did very early on, because I knew I didn't want to go back into the fire managing that type of business again. And so, like, when you're starting a marketplace like this, there's like market assigned and there's market assist. And so like Uber is a market assigned. They are assigning you a driver, and it's almost like if you have a gripe or an issue or a qualm, it's with Uber, because that's who you're paying. And we're more market assist. We assist you in helping you find the best fit lawn care service. But when you work with them, you're paying them through our technology, and we are not your lawn mowing service. And matter of fact, we aren't even the prime contractor.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's a clever way to do it, to avoid all those sorts of headaches.
Yeah, there was a situation, up until recently, where Uber drivers were in jeopardy of being classified as employees,
Yeah.
and luckily that all worked itself out. But we were totally on the sidelines for that whole thing, because we made that bet early on. Like, okay, no, we don't want to be even in the 1099 game, because I just don't want to do that anymore. I'd done it for 15 years. I'd been a contractor for 15 years. I didn't want to be in that game. I wanted to be in the technology game.
Bryan, something I would be.
Go ahead.
So Bryan,
No,
something
go
I'd be curious about is, from the time you've been on the podcast, you seem like a really clear, direct, like respectable guy. And more of an internal question is, from the time you were young and mowing the lawns to now, you've had to put in a lot of time, sweat, blood, tears, all that good stuff. What's your why? Like, what really gets you going?
It's a great question. I when I first got started, I think there was like a chip on my shoulder. I think maybe I'd been bullied in high school or something, and I wanted to like prove everybody wrong that I could build a big business, or there was something irrational. And that was probably like the first 5 years. And then once I built that first business into like I was telling you, like 15, 20 people, I was like, oh man, this ain't about me. This is about the team, about the culture, and this is actually helping me see things from a different paradigm almost. And almost like it was almost like I understood that it was bigger than me, and that was a lot of fun. And so I kind of grew through that period. And then when I sold that business, I retired. I took some time off. I really didn't have any plans to work anymore. And I got bored. I was 33 years old, and I took like 6 months off, and I was like, oh man, there's something missing here. And what I realized was that for me, business is the thing that lends like an interesting storyline to my life. It's the thing that causes me to level up. It's the thing that causes me to be smarter, more humble, and sharper. It's like the forcing function that causes all these good things to happen. And without the business, there's a void that's there. And so for me, like, that's kind of one thing. 20 years of business, is it's like there's an underlying thing that's always been there. It's like, okay, the business is the thing that causes me to be a sharper, smarter person. It's the thing that forces me to learn things that I never would have otherwise been interested in, and to be on top of my A game. And I think, it's like the George Patton quote: "If you're not taking ground, you're losing ground." For me, business is the thing that causes me to keep moving forward, to keep generating new ideas, to keep conquering new territory, and adding value to people that use my products, and the people that work with me on them. It's a lot of fun. And without that, I don't know what I would be doing. You can only sit on a beach for so long.
And Matthew teed up the question I had for me perfectly, and I'm going to try to tee up the next question for Jeff. And that is, I noticed when I was looking at your bio and some of the volunteer work you've done, and a lot of that is centered around mentorship. And I'm curious to hear you explain kind of, why that piece is important to you to kind of share some mentorship with other entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's I get more out of it than anybody because I got to be sharp. So it's kind of like it's like I know if I'm mentoring about a half dozen, maybe 10 different folks now, and I do it for free as a hobby. And so one is it keeps me sharp, keeps me on my toes. I know that I've got to be able to add value when I meet with this person to help them be successful. And so that means like when I get home tonight, I'm not turning on Netflix, I'm turning on YouTube and I'm watching some kind of podcast like this one, or I'm watching a conference that I didn't get to go to or something like that. And so that's fun for me. That helps me like continue to learn more and be better. And then the other thing is I think there's like a fundamental law of the universe is like if you're surrounded by winners, it makes you a winner. And so if I'm able to help people win, I have more people that are winning in my little circle, and then therefore it helps me level up. And I've helped people be way more successful than I've ever been, and that levels me up. And so that's the primary two reasons I do it. There's also like an altruistic thing there too. I feel like, if I died tomorrow, somebody might come to my funeral and say, hey, that dude wasn't such an asshole. He helped me be successful. And so there's kind of that piece of it too.
Yeah, the greatest satisfaction you ever have is by seeing somebody you've worked with or helped or mentored or you had as a student go off and do amazing things.
Oh yeah, I love that.
It's the best. It's the best form of wealth, I think, in many respects. So
I agree.
It's great to hear you say that. That's really a good way to look at life, I think. So Caleb, you were going to tee something up for me. So tee it up because I'm old. Yeah, and I can't remember what you were going to tee up.
Well, I'll go ahead and I'll jump into it. So it's kind of what the question we land the plane with. I didn't tee it up as well with my previous question as I anticipated I would. So we like to ask our guests kind of as an opportunity to close out the episode. If you had the opportunity to go back in time, given the knowledge that you have now over, a 15-year career, prior to GreenPal, and then the experiences you've gained at GreenPal, to give your younger self some advice, what might that advice be?
Yeah. Where do I even start? I guess if I can get in the DeLorean and go back, I would tell my younger self to look for ways to delegate sooner and look for ways to develop little systems and processes and delegate those quicker. And I would tell myself it's better to hire a rock star for an hour a week versus somebody who sucks for 40 hours a week. And so like, if I could just have those two things, I think I could have done everything in half the time or maybe even a fraction of the time and been more successful and helped more people along the way. So delegate sooner, go to the top, hire the best just for a couple hours versus somebody who's mediocre for 40 hours. That would be the advice I'd give myself.
Great advice. And if our listeners and viewers want to find out more about GreenPal or want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so anybody listening to this doesn't want to waste time cutting their own lawn, they can just download GreenPal in the App Store or the Play Store. You get hooked up with a good lawn mowing service in less than a minute. Anybody who wants to get at me, you can reach me on LinkedIn. I've been hanging out there a lot more lately. They've done really good things with that platform, and so just shoot me a message there.
Bryan, it was great having you on. I mean, the clarity that you talked about your journey and the advice you gave was fantastic. It's really great to have you on today.
Hey, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it.
You bet. Take care.